Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call the City Council Urban Affairs Committee meeting to order. We have one item on our agenda. It is order number 21-100-8404, a proposed master concept plan and development agreement submitted by attorney Peter Tam on behalf of the campus at Marlborough in the Results Way Mixed-Use Overlay District. I believe we have Peter Tam with us. Along with him, we have Kevin Sheehan from Greatland Realty, David Gillespie, Francis Ewan from Avalon, and David Keachus from VHB. So if you would all like to, if there's room, or there's a couple of other chairs that you can grab. You can go around, it's probably the easiest. I'll let them get situated. Before they begin, I just want to go over a few things. You all should have a packet received from Golston & Stores that included the letter from Attorney Tam, dated September 22nd, outlining all of the materials, which includes Attachment 1, the proposed master concept plan, also known as Exhibit B, referenced on page 2. Attachment 2, which is the proposed development agreement. Attachment 3, which is the fiscal impact analysis. Attachment 4, the traffic analysis. Exhibit A is the legal description. Exhibit C is the transportation mitigation that's referenced on page 4, and Exhibit D is the environmental strategies referenced on page 4. Additionally, you all received an email from City Engineer Tom DiPersio, who is with us. It comments on the development agreement, and then we have the, I won't call it rebuttal, but the response from Mr. Tam to those comments from Mr. DiPersio. We also received an updated and a larger copy of the master concept plan with a couple of additional changes that they made based on comments from me and I believe from the city engineer. So I don't know, Mr. DiPersio, if you want me to just read your comments that you made. You don't, if people have questions, we'll bring you up to the mic. So, and I guess I will say, in addition, we received an email from the mayor's office with proposed language that he has. So if that gets brought up by anybody, we can discuss that. So I want everybody to be sure that we have the detail from Mr. DiPersio. And his comments were regarding the existing sewer permit. As the DPW sewer division no longer requires such permits, my recommendation would be that this be allowed to expire. On Attachment 1, the proposed master concept plan, it should show the limits of the open space areas and indicate which areas are usable and which are to remain natural. The plan should indicate the square footage of the existing buildings and clarify whether the maximum development program of 1,330,000 gallons per square foot, is that GSF, includes the existing buildings. The plan should also show the location of the proposed restaurant. On Section 103, the phasing should consider requiring a more definitive phasing schedule. And Section 302, the agreement proposes the city accept Martin Angelo Drive and a portion of the campus drive. My recommendation is that if Martin Angelo is to become a public way, the intersection should be reconfigured such that Martin Angelo extends to Cimarrano and Campus Drive becomes a side street. I would also request that the DPW Engineering Division be allowed to inspect the roadways prior to consenting to acceptance. If there's significant deficiencies, the applicant would be responsible for preparation of the necessary plans, deeds, and procedures. On Exhibit C, the transportation mitigation, he's noting a couple of corrections. It's Mass DOT District 3. References to the Commissioner of Public Works should be the city engineer, and Cimarrano Drive, Martin Angelo, should be revised to Cimarrano Campus Drive. And finally, on the environmental strategies, the comments reduce outdoor water use, change study feasibility of irrigation wells to irrigation wells should be used where possible, and reference to the Commissioner of Public Works, again, should be city engineer. So those were the comments received from the city engineer. We have a lot of documents to go over tonight. I think probably the first thing to start with, because if we don't agree on this, we probably don't go to the next step, is the concept plan. So unless you have comments that you want to give us first, and I think the board is at least, I'm not sure which the audience on television can see. So there was clarification added to the new concept plan that does include the totals of the parking, the totals of the building square footage to get us to what is buildable. I'm not sure that it shows specifically the restaurant, except maybe as the amenity area. So I don't know if you want to kind of go over this.
Yes.
With what you've done as changes.
We can do that and be efficient with the committee and council's time. For the record, Peter Tam on behalf of Greatland Realty Partners. Beside me is Dan Keshis from VHB, Kevin Sheehan from Greatland, and David Gillespie from Avalon Bay Communities. Madam Chair, if, just by way of brief introduction for those members of the committee that may have forgotten, and councilors, where we are in this process, I think it helps to take a quick step back before we take a step forward. We're very pleased to be here in what is representative of the second step in the development process for the redevelopment of the campus at Marlborough, which is a over 120-acre site that you can see behind me, reflected in two parcels. On the site is over 500,000 square feet today of office. I'm going to touch quickly on process and then turn it over briefly to Kevin and in turn David to touch on the respective plans for development. So this is a second step because the first step was the council's approval of zoning earlier this year, which overlaid the industrial zoning here with the Results Way mixed-use overlay district. And this is a sub-district. This is sub-district 2. The original sub-district was adopted for the property across the street. The overlay requires that we submit, and this is where we're in the second step, both a master concept plan as well as a development agreement for your consideration and approval. We've done so, and we greatly appreciate the comments from the city's engineer. We believe that we have addressed the comments on the plan, and we can address those items that he identified with respect to the development agreement. We have submitted, and what you have on the screen behind me is the update. And I can touch quickly on those updates, but it may be helpful just to get a sense of what is represented on the plan before we highlight those 3 or 4 items that were updated to reflect the city engineer's comments. So I'm going to turn it over first to Kevin and David to touch on what is represented on the development plan. For members of the committee, because this is not a typical rezone, the master concept plan is intended to be the general development plan that governs development in this sub-district upon your approval. So it's not intended to be a full-blown site plan. It's a conceptual plan. If approved, this plan will be the basis for site plan submissions for individual project components going forward. And you can expect that those specific submittals would come before you for approval and in the relative near term. So with that introduction, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin.
Good evening. Hello, Kevin Sheehan here from Greatland. I'm going to describe the commercial component on the plans briefly, and then I'll let Dave talk about the residential component. But the overall intent here is to propose a mixed-use campus that is appeals to life science tenants. So we have a great existing base to start from, and it's labeled on the plans here. There are 4 existing buildings that are in sort of, those footprints are grayed out, but it's clearly labeled on the plans that you have. Existing building 1, 2, 3, and 4, and the square footage associated with that is 525,000 roughly, and each building has listed the number of stories associated with it. So these buildings are occupied by some great companies. In particular, the headquarters of Hologic is here, as you all know. That itself is a life science company. And I think you also all are aware that we've more recently, since Greatland acquired the property, signed a lease with BJ's to move its relocate its headquarters here to the campus. So just for reference, Hologic's building occupies the entirety of Building 3, and BJ's will eventually occupy the entirety of Building 2. There are multiple tenants existing in Building 1, and essentially the campus will be all full upon the occupancy of BJ's next summer. Building 4 is an amenities building to the campus, so that contains a fitness center and a cafeteria, and another improvement that we've made to the property since we bought it. We've put in a new operator for the existing cafeteria space, which is in Building 4. And to answer your question, Councilor Roby, the expansion of the restaurant will also be in Building 4, in the existing square footage, and will basically coexist with this amenity area outside of Building 4 to create the real heart of the campus. So if I turn to the new buildings that are outlined in bold on the plan, the first one is already under construction, which is labeled Garage 1 on the plan. It's 4 levels, 84,000 square feet. We've undertaken that construction in connection with our obligations to deliver the space in Building 2 to BJ's. The future building phases will each come with some additional parking spaces, and I'll briefly describe them here. BioRing Building 5, which is on the far right side of the plan, a total of 120,000 square feet. BioRing Building 6, which is on the bottom of the commercial space plan, which is a 2-story building, which is about 150,000 square feet. And both of these buildings are very large floor plates and very high clear heights. And so these are the buildings that we've been talking about that will appeal to biomanufacturing uses and have those specific structures that we need to accommodate those types of uses. Moving around the plan, BioRing Building 7 and Building 8 are 4-story structures that are more suitable to R&D uses. So these would look and act a little bit more like office buildings, but would have all the infrastructure required for life science uses. So they have smaller footprints and are envisioned as 4-story buildings as opposed to 2-story buildings. That is the basic summary of the commercial component, so I'll turn it over to Dave to talk about the residential.
Thank you very much, David Gillespie from Avalon Bay. As you can see in the bottom left corner of the site, we are proposing 100 residential units in keeping with the zoning. The outline of the site plan is a single curb cut off of Martin Angelo, a single new curb cut off of Martin Angelo, and then really an oval-shaped circulation pattern to access all of the units. There are 208 parking spaces shown here, and the gross square footage is about 175,000 square feet. Many of these buildings have their own garages, have their own integral garages, similar to what we built across the street. There's plenty of area for landscaped open space for residents, and we are very proud of some of the green strategies that we're proposing here for this development. All of the units are 2 and 3 stories. All the buildings are 2 and 3 stories. And this is similar to our direct entry product, which every unit has its own front door. There's no common lobbies. There's no common corridors. It really acts as, sort of a single family, or you really control your own access to and from your home. Series of garages. It has a private trash facility at the back upper left of our site plan. You can see that. That's our own trash and recycling facility for our own private hall. And that's really it. We plan to have a dog park and several outdoor areas for residents as well.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, I can touch on the items that we've addressed with respect to the city engineer's comments on the plan, unless you prefer to. I think you identified the issues already.
Yes.
So in just a minute, I think I can summarize them and point to where how we propose to address them on the plan. The first item was identifying the areas of open space on the plan. It is a requirement under the zoning. We had identified a minimum open space of 40% of the total site be maintained as open space. Because of the large nature of the site, virtually all of that area is along the periphery. And in the top right on the locust plan, you'll see a new shade that reflects the minimum open space, which captures at least 40% of the total site. So we thought, in order to keep this on a single plan and keep it simple, that was the best way to reflect the open space. So you have both a percentage and you have that percentage approximated on the plan in the locust plan. If the committee would like any additional information, we can certainly provide it. The second comment was really a question about the total gross square footage under the master concept plan. We had indicated a maximum development program, as you see in the summary in the top left, of 1,330,000 square feet. And the question was, does that include the existing buildings? And in fact, it does. So we've provided an additional detail in the bottom right, which is the proposed program summary. And if you follow that, it may be hard on the plan on the screen, but if you follow that on your handout, you'll see the totals and each building broken down. Similarly, we've done the same exercise with respect to parking, understanding that these are approximations at this stage. This is not at the site plan level. But to give you an idea of the planned 3,165 parking spaces, the parking summary reflects where those spaces are located and accounts for them, whether it be in surface or in proposed or existing garage. The engineer also requested that we identify the proposed restaurant and amenity space. Kevin pointed to this during the overview, and we have identified the area adjacent to Building 14. Building 14 would likely be where a restaurant may be located, and you can see how it's linked to the amenity area. The master plan doesn't call for identification of uses per se, but we thought it was helpful to do so. That was it in terms of the specifics, in terms of relatively modest clarifications to the master concept plan. We do know that there are also comments on the development agreement, but we'll pause, Madam Chair, until you're ready for that.
All right. I can open this up to committee members if there are questions on the concept plan first. Councilor Doucette?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Couple of questions, really. So first is, I appreciate the note that you're saying that 5% of the parking would be for electric vehicles. I think that's a great step, and appreciate you taking that step. The fiscal impact analysis, first page, you said the apartment's going to be done by mid-2021. When do you really think that's going to happen? So,
The typo and
I think that's probably more for the development agreement piece.
Okay.
I think I want questions specifically to the plan.
Okay. If we're just going to focus on the master plan, then it really boils down to two other questions. First is, I hope, because you were referring to pedestrian access, bicycle access, there's the whole streets design, where basically there is spacing for specific bicycles and sidewalks and stuff. And if you're going to take that, I'd take that seriously. The other is back to the restaurant. Do you see the restaurant being a destination restaurant, or is it just going to be something that's going to focus on the community of people working here?
Yeah, I can respond to that. We do see it being a destination. We hope it's a destination to the broader community. The operator that has opened up there in September is called the Craft Food Hall. We've worked with them at some of our other locations. So today, the cafeteria is open to the public. It's not really outward facing, and they're just really getting the operation started up, so they haven't done a lot of marketing of the existing cafeteria. But for the next phase expansion, we plan it to be, have a front door and be much more outward facing and be a bigger space that has more seating capacity, and hopefully will attract the public here on nights and weekends.
So I wish you the best with that. You have an opportunity here because of the location, that you have a westerly view from this area, that where it's kind of set up now, it's being surrounded by buildings and you don't get to see it. But if the restaurant's at a place where it does have a western view, then that will be a destination. I can assure you that. If it's in the middle of a building complex, I don't see it. But, you take that as a word of advice. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, if I may respond just on the question of complete streets, I neglected to make an observation, and this is in addition to the master plan. I think that is directly responsive. We did, based on feedback, update the master plan, and it's hard to see, but you'll see a dashed line delineating a potential public walking route that essentially circles the perimeter of the developed area. And that reflects an approach to complete streets that we expect will be submitting additional information in connection with site plan submissions to follow. The intent is that we know that there are members of the public that enjoy traversing portions of the site. The site will remain as it is in terms of the perimeter. There's no anticipated closure, but I think the owner would welcome the public to the restaurant and to a potential dedicated walking trail that could be established in the course of site plan, subject to the owner's reasonable rules and regulations.
And I think that this came about with the discussion that I had with you, Mr. Tam, based on the conversation back when we were discussing the whole Results Way rezoning, and the fact that in Zone 1, or Subdistrict 1 of this, there is the walking path that is an unpaved walking path with a deed to the city for that path. Because this site has an existing sidewalk on it, my assumption was that there would not be a desire to go in and create a path through the woods, which could happen, I guess. But I wanted to make sure that they were willing to let the public walk the sidewalk. Now, your question on bicycles, I would assume then the public could ride their bicycle on the street portion, the paved street, not the sidewalk, because we don't like bicycles on sidewalks. At least I don't. They belong in the street. So that's not an issue for you either, I would take it.
I wouldn't expect so, and I would imagine that, looking to Dan from VHB, that any evaluation and assessment of bike and pedestrian safety would be performed in connection with site plan approval. So if there's additional amenities or provisions for bike storage or what have you, we could certainly address it when specific projects are before you.
Okay. Yeah, I would guess that some of the employees may be wanting to ride their bicycles. It is a steep hill, so it's interesting if they're choosing that mode of transportation. I also applaud the public that wants to walk from Cimarano up the hill, because it is a nice steep hill and gets your heartbeat going. But I'm glad that the public is allowed, because there was language within the development agreement that makes that unclear. So I wanted the clarification. Does that answer your questions then for?
For now, that's good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else with questions on the concept plan? Oh, Councilor Landers. I'm looking for you to raise your hand.
You have to look to your left sometimes, Madam Chair. I'm curious, is part of the site going to be off limits to pedestrians or nosy city councilors that like to walk around and drive around? I mean, we have a few, and rightly so. Boston Scientific is completely off limits, and that was quite open when it was Stratus Computer. Raytheon is very much off limits. So what will be the status of this wonderful complex? By the way, I can't imagine riding a bike through this complex here, unless I had an electric bike, but that's cheating. What is the idea? Will some of it be open, some of it not? How will it work out? I mean, I know we're going to have different types of corporations there. It's going to be, a mixture of Raytheon and Boston Scientific. So will it be open to the public, that they can walk through down the pathways, the roadways, or what? What's the thinking right now?
Yeah. So our intent is that, yes, it would remain open the way it is today. That could change if, we get a very security-conscious user that, wants to secure the perimeter of one of these individual buildings. But I think that would be more limited to, specific areas around a building. And we do not foresee, the entire campus being closed off in any way.
Yeah, because I think of the waterfront in Boston and the financial district. You're quite free to walk along the waterfront there, from the aquarium, west and not east, because that's Europe. But I just hate to think that this beautiful site, and has great potential, could be a gated industrial community. That's all. I'll have more questions later, Madam Chair.
Okay. And although it did not get specified when Mr. Tam went through the response, on page 1 of the detail, it does state that the public is welcome on portions of the site subject to the owner's rules and regulations, and a public walking route has been added to the plan that's intended to designate a potential walking loop on sidewalks around the perimeter. And the specific location can be established in the course of the site plan approval process as it's further developed. So they are cognizant that there is an existing sidewalk, and sidewalks seem like a safe way to go for the public versus the unpaved or the gravel path that got created on Subdivision 1. Do you have a question, Councilor Ossington? Are you finished, Councilor Landers, or did you have further?
Yeah, I could go on, but that's good for now.
All right.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, I was just going to say I bike through there once a week, just mostly to check on the construction of the garage, but I would offer that there are plenty of, I assume they're the workers for the facilities that are out walking around the perimeter of the campus, Martin Angelo Drive and Campus Drive, each week that I go through there, so I know it is being used. Thank you.
Thank you. So other questions from committee? Councilor Wagner?
Follow-up clarification, and I don't know if it's jumping ahead, but under agreement, so this is where I was confused. So on page 6, it refers to section 4.05, no public grant. So restrictions hereby conveyed do not grant to the public in general any right to enter the property, but then it refers to 3.2, so that statement is opposite of everything that was just said, so I'm confused about how those two go together.
I think there would be an amendment to the draft development agreement that would then clarify that the public is welcome to walk the route.
Because there's the route, but then there's the the restaurant, which is right smack in the middle, so I'm confused, but how do you say you don't have access to the property, but you could go to the restaurant in the middle of the property and you can walk the ring? So I don't, how are you supposed to know the difference? What's allowed, what's not?
Madam Chair, I might be able to help respond. The language that you quite rightfully identify is boilerplate from the past development agreement for the property across the street. If the council is interested in establishing through the development agreement public rights on private property, we're open to consideration, but the specifics of that will really only be established, as Kevin points out, in the course of the tenanting and development. So we can certainly, Madam Chair, to your point, I think in this language update it to reflect our negotiating in good faith of a public route through the development that will be established in your review in the course of site plan approval.
And it's, I believe, at Subdistrict 1, there is a restaurant within, it was between Quest and...
Whole Foods.
And it is open to the public. So people go into that driveway. They're not on the walking path. They're going in the driveway, parking their car, and they walk into the building and can eat at the restaurant. And if the language is exactly the same from Subdistrict 1, it works there. I don't see it an issue. For me, it was more the
Madam
walking.
Chair, I mean, if that's going to be the case, it just feels, I mean, clarity to me is always, I think, the ultimate goal. So we shouldn't have that kind of conflict written in the language that says it's completely off any language that says it's not open to the public, and yet there's these understood parts of it that it is open to the public. There seems like there should be some, I lost the word, that those two should reconcile.
And I would agree. I think between Mr. Tam and the solicitor to come up with some language, if it's specific, I would guess that all of the other buildings within this are going to be a keyed entrance, so the public's not allowed in. I know the gym was specifically for employees of that site. That's not going to become a public gym. I believe it would just be the restaurant that you're looking to open up to the public to bring people there. So the restaurant is kind of in the middle of that. There's parking nearby it. So the rest of it, I don't think is really an issue. It's just clarifying that people can access the site to get to the restaurant. They can access the site to walk on the sidewalks. We don't really want the public, I don't see why the public would use it as a cut-through anywhere. So it's not like they're going to be driving up and around the road thinking they can go somewhere else. As at Boston Scientific, where you used to be able to cut through to go from 85 over to Pleasant Street, you can't do that now because they have blocked it off. And I don't think that's their plan, to make the top part of that be not public access. But we can clarify that when we get to that part.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, anybody else that had a hand up? Did I see Councilor Oram?
Thank you. First and foremost, I thought I heard Building 14. There's no Building 14, correct? You were referencing the annex, the amenity building? You meant Building 4, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
My apologies.
Oh, no problem. I might have misheard, too, so my apology if I did. The question I have is with the amenity building. You have 491 spaces dedicated to Garage 4. Is Garage 4 for the amenity building? Is it match like Building 4, Garage 4? How does that work?
Well, let me, Madam Chair, if I may, initially respond and let Kevin gather his thoughts in terms of the phasing of the overall development has not yet been firmly established. That's going to really depend on the market. The parking that's provided will be developed as site plans come before you. So what's represented here is essentially the general framework of plans that will come before you. The amenity building, I think, is intended principally to benefit the workers and those folks who are on site.
So you're not looking at a restaurant?
I think, and Kevin, I won't speak for him, but he's been before you before, and we've represented some quite nice ideas for a number of food uses that would be appealing to folks in the community. If that's the case, I think there is a synergy between folks leaving the site in the evening and the public being able to avail themselves and become patrons of a restaurant or cafe or what have you up here. But we're really at the conceptual level. So I'll turn it over to Kevin.
Yes, if the question is about, is there specific assigned parking for the restaurant, the answer is no. We think we have an appropriate amount of parking spaces on site now to serve the existing buildings. We're adding parking as part of our agreement with an investment with BJ's. And again, putting a pretty considerable amount of money into the existing buildings in this first phase, which will create more parking. And Dan here at BHB, we've done a shared parking analysis that basically tells us that there is enough parking to support the restaurant use because it is more of an off-hours use between what we have existing and even at full build-out, which is what's represented here on this plan. There will be enough parking to serve all of the commercial uses, the residential use, as well as the restaurant use.
And if I may, while we're on that note, and I understand it's in concept at this point, but would there be any consideration for off-hour parking for people to use your open space to walk around or your public sidewalks and so forth? Would that be a possibility? So if I'm planning to walk and I live on the other side of the city, would there be available parking? And I understand the off hours, if you're at capacity, there probably won't be parking for the general public to go in, but is that something that's been looked at?
Yeah, again, I would say it's an open campus. Anybody could drive on the campus and park there today and walk around. We do have security, and we do have a presence, but we don't, really restrict people from going on the property and walking around the property, and we wouldn't expect to do that in the future.
And I have one more question, Madam Chair, if I may. It's related to public safety. What brought you to the amount of $25,000 for the donation for Westerly Fire Station?
Madam Chair, through you, we had understood, and I know Kevin and David in their discussions beginning with the ward councilor and with others in the community, understand that the council has been spending a lot of time on a West Side Fire Station. There's no requirement to make, obviously, a contribution, but we thought where it will benefit the development, Kevin and David agreed that a contribution of some significance was important, and to do that early on. So that contribution would be made shortly after signing the development agreement once it's finalized. And that is intended to help support both planning and design of that fire station.
Is that conceptual and could be changed?
I think the development agreement is in draft form, Councilor.
So the 25 is not negotiable, is what you're saying, the 25,000 that's being offered.
I guess I would argue it has to be negotiable. We have to approve this by two-thirds vote, so we'll get to that discussion when we get to the development agreement. Which
Thank you.
There's probably lots of pieces of that I'm sure we'll have.
Thank you for your comments. And thank you, Madam
Chair. On, because they can't do anything until the plan is approved and the development agreement is approved, and that takes 8 votes of the council. So I think they're well aware of that. All right, so I'm sorry, Councilor Navin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just real quick, because I don't want to belabor the point on parking, I think just want to get it out there. You had mentioned that there is going to be, there's obviously we're very early here. There's not a lot of, there's not going to be parking dedicated for the restaurant. We just note that I think it would be helpful if it is going to be open to the public that the parking surrounding the restaurant is not dedicated specifically to one of the businesses, therefore making it a little bit more difficult for outside members of the public who may want to come up to have to park a little bit further away if there are, spots that are dedicated. So I do want to just raise that. I also want to raise, again, I know we're early. You mentioned, Attorney Tam, that when some of the times you're here, you talked about some of the exciting things that could be here. The beer garden was an excellent suggestion, so I just want to, keep that at the top of your list. That's, don't want to lose the important things here. And then finally, as we talk about these things, we are, especially this part of the city, is home to a lot of great walking trails in addition to this area. So a way to encourage people to get out into the, the Crane Swamp Trail Network and, the MWA Aqueduct trails are also over there, can take you from Northborough all the way through Southborough. So, it's a great amenity. As you guys are talking about building something that's pretty world class, I encourage you to do that. So that's it for now. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And if you all don't remember, you can find the PowerPoint that they gave us back. I have it, but I forgot what the date was. It does show that beer garden and the restaurant amenities. So it's a concept plan, but hopefully they will be able to bring that to fruition when they get to that point, because I think we were all excited about a beer garden, and it looked beautiful up there. And I think based on the pictures that I looked at the PowerPoint, people will have a pretty nice view of the landscape. All right. Other questions from anybody on the plan itself? If not, we can get into the nitty-gritty of the development agreement. And if you want to go through the rest of the comments that have been, that were sent by the city engineer specific to the development agreement, you can go through those.
Certainly, Madam Chair. I think just for 30 seconds before we get into the specific nitty-gritty, the development agreement here is, as I noted, based upon the previously approved development agreement for the property across the street. But we've tailored it to try to anticipate issues and comments we heard from you and from other professional staff and members of the community. The development agreement is set up in a way that it provides history of the site, the existing development, existing conditions that provide some context for the reader when they pick it up 10 years from now. It talks about the site plan approval process that would be required following the approval by the council of the development agreement and the master concept plan. And that site plan approval process is before the council. It's somewhat unique. And that would, once that site approval for particular projects is approved by the council, that process and that approval would supersede the prior approvals that were done under existing zoning for large tract development on site. And I think that's helpful to establish a marker of where we would be at and which zoning would then apply. There's the opportunity for third-party review of site plans as is required and contemplated in the zoning. There's discussion of phasing, which, as Kevin and others have noted, it's preliminary at this time, and it's really going to be informed by market conditions at the time of site plan. That is comparable to the previous development agreement. There is a contribution, actually a payment that's made in connection with the housing component of the master plan. And that's consistent also with the previous plan. Again, the housing here is allowed as of right in this overlay district, such that the inclusionary housing provisions of the underlying zoning do not apply. But much like the property across the street, a contribution to be negotiated with the council is being submitted, and that is to the amount of $3,000 per unit, with 100 units proposed. There are transportation commitments that are attached as an exhibit in detail, and those are consistent with and comparable to the transportation commitments that were identified with the approval of the 650,000 square foot Phase 2 some 15 years ago. So the traffic consultants have reviewed and assessed how this reflects, and this is reflected in the traffic study, how this new master plan compares to that which was approved, including baseline conditions back in 2005, 2006, and have concluded that the traffic impacts are essentially comparable, and so the commitments towards mitigation are in fact the same, even though peak period traffic is projected to decrease slightly relative to what was previously assessed. There is the fire and public safety contribution, which Kevin and his team have offered. And there's, importantly, a detailed list of environmental strategies that the project owner and proponents are committed to assessing to be back before you. These are green and environmental energy efficiency strategies that would be detailed for any building that is proposed going forward. So touching quickly on the city engineer's comments with respect to the development agreement, he asked for a consideration of a more definitive phasing schedule. And our response is that really is going to be informed by the marketing and the conditions at the time as the market might warrant. This is very similar to what was committed to with respect to the original development agreement for the property across the street that was approved by the council. We, as Kevin has outlined, there is work underway, both with the substantial new 4-story parking garage, and I think David and his team, along with Kevin and his team, anticipate submitting to you with the approval of this master plan and development agreement for site plan approval, likely for the initial commercial building along with the residential component in the near term, that is within the next 30 to 60 days.
And I think I'm going to stop you there because I'm going to throw out the elephant that's in the room. The council had approved a housing moratorium which technically expired October 18th, but because we advertised the request of the mayor to extend it, it still is ongoing. And if it's approved by the council, would be in effect through December 31st. Now, I had to reread the moratorium because when it was approved and I knew that there was the potential, the agreement for the results-way mixed-use overlay says that the property owner developer, oh, did I go too far? The master plan is submitted prior to or simultaneously with the first application for approval of a site plan or a special permit. Housing is not a special permit in this sub-district. It's a site plan. However, the moratorium language specified that no site plan or special permit can be approved by this body. So when we get to the moratorium discussion, and I know I was cautioned by the solicitor because the moratorium isn't on our agenda per se, we can't really go into a lot of detail on the moratorium, but I think that we as a body need to think about the fact that we approved this project back in June, knowing that housing was a priority. Now, the mayor has sent us a letter where he has stated that he has informed everybody that he doesn't want the housing. The mayor doesn't approve housing. This body approves housing. We approve all the special permits for housing over 4 units. So although he may not like what we approve and he may not like what we disapprove, that's our right, and it was his right when he sat as a city councilor for 18 years. He should remember that. So I think we need to have that discussion when we get to the moratorium. Either we, and I'm prepared to add an amendment to the moratorium that would exclude this parcel when they submit their site plan, so that they can in fact submit something sooner rather than later, if that's their desire and they're ready to go. Otherwise, they would have to wait until January when the moratorium was over, if we approve the moratorium. They can't submit site plan while the moratorium is in effect. We can decide not to approve the extension of the moratorium when we get to that point, or we could decide to approve it with a potential amendment. So be aware that that's where we kind of are as a council, and we will need to be making a decision at some point. Councilor Doucette.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Could it be possible, if these guys come in with another project to, let's say, the Building 5 bio-ring, can they propose it and we approve it without the housing?
Well, we can't approve any housing with the moratorium in place. So
right. But
they
can
could
we
submit
exclude the
site
housing
plan.
from the proposal and take it off the table and approve the rest?
Yes. They wouldn't be able to submit a site plan. They could for housing.
We can't break up the site plan and do the housing separate from
Well, I think they would be 2 separate site plans anyway. Site plan for the housing and site plan for a building.
Right.
2 separate projects, 2 separate site plans with detail of the specificity
That makes
of
it clear.
the
Thank
plan.
I think, Madam Chair, so just for the benefit of the council and the public, the project going forward is a true mixed-use project. The residential component is limited. As you had noted, it was contemplated, it's an as-of-right use within the overlay, and there's no more than 100 units. Our commitment in terms of phasing is that Kevin is hard at work on the development of the existing buildings, the completion of the work associated with BJ's, including that large garage. And that's essentially how we consider Phase 1. Phase 2, I think, would be Kevin and David submitting, as you note, 2 separate site plans concurrently to the council as soon as is reasonable for consideration of the first commercial building and the residential component. And then thereafter, additional commercial development would be filed and constructed as conditions warrant. The plan before you is simply a general overlay master plan. The phasing that was contemplated in the past development agreement was even less detailed than this. But that is the commitment I think that we're prepared to make. And with respect to the housing component, while limited, we're certainly prepared to make that filing as soon as is reasonably warranted.
And I think I need to remind people, the moratorium, I believe, was brought in by the mayor and agreed on by the council for basically 2 reasons. The change that the legislature made, which made it unclear where within the city an MBTA site would go. This is not a request to make that a site. And the other one was, when projects are submitted, is the vote 6 votes or is the vote 8 votes? It's clear on this one that without the development and the concept plan, which takes 8 votes, we know what the votes are. So the moratorium rationale, to me, doesn't really fit this site, for me personally. I opposed the housing to begin with. I was 1 out of 11 who voted no on that rezoning project. So I am happy to push for housing as soon as they want to build it, because I think that was the desire. And we can have that discussion when we get there. So did I see a hand over here, Councilor Landers or Councilor Navin?
Did I just hear you say that I think you did vote against any housing from day one.
I voted against the whole rezoning of the Results Way
Yeah,
mixed
see,
use.
I feel just the opposite, quite honestly. When I see someone coming in with 1.3 million square feet, let's take away the 175,000 for the say the condos or the apartments or whatever they are. I think it's foolish on our part to think that someone's going to come in and do about 1.1 million, and that of all the people that are going to work there, whether it's Whole Logic or X company, Y company, why we wouldn't at least minimally have 100 units of housing. And let's assume it's Avalon, and I've watched Avalon build at least 2 of their sites, and I'll tell you, they're top. Especially that last one there, that was, 123 units or something. They did a beautiful job on that, tying it into the old, upgrading it. So I just can't envision why we're having this conversation about moratorium. I think that's going to end. We always could put something in there that could exclude this. I think we'd take away from this whole project of the campus, 120 acres, if we didn't have. Now, if you were talking 500 units of housing or 1,000 or something like that, but 100 unit of Avalon type of either condos or apartments, when you're bringing in $1.1 million square feet of development, I don't know how we could exclude it. Quite honestly, I think we ought to, Madam Chair, I think we ought to move very slowly on that. That's it.
Councilor Navin, did you have your hand up?
I did, but I have the further
Councilor
President.
Ossing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, again, the chair is just trying to let the councilors know, so this can't turn into a housing moratorium conversation, right? I mean, that we will all have that opportunity on November 8th at the public hearing. And if you're really excited, you can attend the planning board public hearing to get your first shots in. But the chair's just making you aware of it. There's nothing that prevents us from steaming ahead with the review for the master concept plan and the development agreement, because, as the chair has said, the applicant has to come back with site plan, because this council will be serving as the site plan review authority if this gets approved. The first step is you got to approve the concept master agreement and the master plan and the development agreement. Those have to happen. That's step 2. Everybody clear? Yep. I'm happy to answer questions if you're not clear. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, so if you want to continue on with the response, and then I will get into set. Oh, I'm sorry. Councilor Navin, now you want to speak.
Well, I was happy to defer to the President as I try to be, but I did just a couple of comments as we're starting to discuss this. This phasing has come up a couple of times. This is a great project. I was happy to support it in the rezoning. I'm happy to see some housing. I'm very excited to see some of the buildings here. Madam Chair, you did mention the letter that the mayor had sent, which says he has concerns about the housing being built without some of the buildings going up, and had proposed an amendment here. I guess with the phasing, one of my concerns is, right, and you hit it right on the head, which is completely reasonable. It depends on the market and it depends on the conditions. But what I would hate to see is, something come in where the housing comes in and we don't get to see some of, what will be awesome development up here get fully realized. And we've seen it time and again lately across the city where projects have been approved, and because of the market or because of financing or some other things, they've languished. We've got Eon Main sitting across the street as a giant hole in the ground. We've got a couple other development projects downtown that have happened. That's on the housing side, but still, I think it's a reasonable question, and something we should really discuss here is, how can we get a little bit of everything? Obviously, not looking to make it untenable for you guys, but I think it would be nice to not only have the rehab of some of the existing buildings, but know when we can realistically move forward, and we can, use that office space to try and attract, some additional awesome, biopharmaceutical manufacturing or some other companies to Marlborough. So I think it's worthy of the discussion. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, so we can kind of go through this, and then I'll get a sense of where the committee is. I know this is not going to get done tonight. To see if there are specific questions. I think there's really only...
Madam Chair, I think I can address this in a minute or less. Just in terms of the engineer's remaining comments, and certainly preserve time for your questions and comments. The other non-technical minor edits are two that the engineer identifies and that we would agree to address in the development agreement that could be revised. He notes we had suggested that if you look on the plan behind me, or actually better yet on the aerial, the connection between both Forest Road and Cimarano Drive is a connection that I think we all make with some frequency. That's actually Martin Angelo is a private drive, and Campus Drive, which leads up to the hill, is a private road. We had suggested in the development agreement that we undertake efforts to have that accepted as a public way. That stretch of Campus Drive at the front door at Cimarano, and the extent of Martin Angelo to Forest. The engineer's comments are simply that there are a number of considerations. I don't think he passes judgment on whether or not that's appropriate, but there may need to be improvements, and there may need to be assessment about what may be necessary in terms of process and in terms of physical improvements to make that public. And I think at the development agreement stage, I think we're willing to accept and have our design team work with him to ensure that he has the information he needs, and we can proceed to have that accepted if the city deems it appropriate. I don't think we have to say definitively that it shall be public at this time. And then the last item that was non-technical was the existing sewer permit. And I don't recall if you mentioned this, Madam Chair, but there is an existing permit that was associated with that 2005 Phase 2 development approval, which is Councilor Navin has pointed to. We've all been patiently awaiting further development here. I think the fact that Greatland has the know-how on the life science side of things to implement and add value here is valuable from a less so for what's put into the development agreement than knowing who you're dealing with. But with respect to that existing sewer permit, that reserved capacity for future development that hasn't been realized in 15 years. So no matter what you put in an agreement, you need a market in order to go forward. We recognize that permit, while still legally effective, is probably less relevant as project components go forward here. So we're in general agreement with the city engineer that as site plan is submitted, we'd follow in due course with the ordinary permitting process for sewer connections with respect to individual projects.
Thank you, and I know I had the conversation with you. I'm happy that that is an agreement that you're willing to go with, because you do make it clear that the already approved site plan, Phase 2, you're willing to give that up and start from scratch with new site plans that are being submitted. So that already was in the document. We can amend this draft to take care of the fact that the existing sewer permit goes away technically, and as site plan is brought in, then you'll deal with what happens currently. And if anybody has questions on that, the city engineer is here to clarify what we do now. If you want, he can explain that process. Mr. DePercio, do you want to come up to the podium and...
Good evening. Is there a specific question, or should I just explain the comment?
Why don't you tell us when they submit a site plan, what would be the process for getting approval for the sewer water that they need?
So just stepping back, I guess, to that permit that has been extended over the years, over many years now, was initially issued at a time when the conditions were different at the Westerly wastewater treatment plant. There was a capacity issue at that time, and the city was being strict about how they approved new connections and what the gallons per day for those connections would be. Today, that's not the case, so we just look at the proposed connections, proposed site plans as they come in, case by case, and we're cognizant that there's not unlimited capacity in the water or sewer system, but we don't have restrictions at this time. So it's our job to make sure we're doing projects on both the water and the sewer side to mitigate the additional flows, but there's nothing specific in terms of restrictions or general capacity issues that we apply in a general manner to new connections. So we're going to look at these as they come in case by case and talk about the mitigation necessary as they come in. And they get permitted as part of the site plan approval process.
So the original agreement gives them 50,232 gallons per day. And I had asked you what their current use is, and if, I know it would be difficult to determine if, in fact, by the time they build all these new buildings, will they actually max out this gallons per day?
So my estimation would be the current use is well below that. It's generally office use now. That's my understanding of what's there existing. There's not a big demand water sewer-wise with office use. Part of my review of these site plans as they come in is to try to get a sense, especially on the big GMP buildings, an estimate from the applicants as to what those flows projected might be. And those are ones that my understanding now is that there can be a big range depending on the exact tenants that are in the buildings, but those are the ones that we're going to want to try to work with them and get some sense on buildings of that size what the demand will be.
Any councilors have questions, clarification? Councilor Oram.
Just a point, Tom. Just a point I'd like to make on the gallonage. Just the housing alone with 100 units will bring 11,000 gallons to the 51,000 that was discussed. So I think it's something that needs to be monitored. If there's a water-intensive industry in there, plus we know 11,000 from the housing, we could be, as you say, there's limited capacities no matter where we look with what either the easterly or westerly plants. So I would ask that during site plan that be revisited to make sure we're not going past capacity for not just this project but for all the projects that we're looking at. So I hope that's under consideration at that time.
Absolutely. That's always we're always cognizant of that as we approve new projects as they come in.
Anybody? Councilor Landers.
I'm just curious, Tom. It happened to be my committee that every 3 years we would approve that permit for the 50,000 plus. What if it went up to 100 or 150,000? I mean, would this slow down their plans or their progress or what tenants they bring in or what owners they bring in? I mean, there must be some limit.
Sure. Yeah, there's not unlimited capacity on the sewer side. The limit is related to our discharge permits with our NIPD's permits. We're not near the capacity on those. Those talk about rolling averages over months or the year. There can be spikes. There's spikes on the sewer side where flows are high, but we're not near those limits, and it's our job to always be doing projects that on the sewer side can reduce infiltration and inflow, so that we maintain the buffer that we have there, and on the water side. doing projects that can increase the efficiency of the distribution network or the efficiency of the pumps at the pump station to make sure as sites with bigger demand come online, we're not jeopardizing capacity in other parts of the city.
Madam Chair, through you, what I was a little sat up straight on is that the housing is really, under the old rules, using better than 10% of the capacity that we've permitted them. Now, is housing apt to be more than a 200,000 square foot building?
Depending on what the
depends
use of the
they're
building.
doing.
Multifamily housing is it's a high demand use in terms of water and sewer, much more so than office use. But again, the GMP buildings, some of these new biomanufacturing companies can have a high demand for water.
Well, for cooling and different operations that they might have, I would say that 50,000 wouldn't, if you were still using that rule, would not be adequate.
But I will remind you, Councillor, when we keep approving the plan, it was in conjunction with a site plan that didn't have housing. The housing is new.
Correct.
So
And
if
that was
you
probably
look at the
contemplated
existing-
office use more than some of these new type of uses.
Right, which is kind of why I think we need to just say, let's just get rid of that sewer permit and start from scratch like we would any other new site plan coming in. And they seem to be...
Madam Chair, we do agree with that. And just to clarify for the record, the existing development combined with Phase 2 contemplated and approved a total volume gallons per day at something to the tune of approximately 115,000 across the site, of which only some, perhaps half of that is being utilized today. So we agree with you and with the city's engineer that it's speculative to conclude today what the demands will be at full build-out. We know that there is adequate capacity for projects going forward. We anticipate addressing this issue in the course of site plan. And during that time, Dan and the design team will submit and review with the city's engineer actual demands based on actual volumes informed by tenant requirements.
Okay, I think that makes me happy. I think it makes the city engineer happy, and hopefully is a good idea from everybody. All right, so
Didn't make me
it is 9 o'clock. We can keep going. If councilors want to ask specific questions that they might want an answer for in the future, or if they have comments they want to make, or if we kind of want to end it here and set up another meeting to go through the nitty-gritty of this development agreement.
Madam Chair.
What's your pleasure, Councilor
Just a
Orr?
quick note, I was happy to see the engineer address irrigation needs, and I understand you're in agreement with it as well, that irrigation wells will be considered, or shall be considered, use the correct verb on that, versus using city water. That will help tremendously with our resources of clean water. Not that irrigation wells don't provide clean water, but again, you're drawing from the area where you're putting it back in, and I'm glad that that was brought out for consideration as an environmental strategy. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Orr. Anybody else with specific questions, comments, issues they want to be able to have addressed when we meet again? No? Anything?
Motion to adjourn then?
Councilor
I would
Wagner,
add,
header.
I would love to go into the environmental section, but that would make sense to do that another evening, and just want to highlight that.
Yeah, I know there was a lot between the fiscal impact, the traffic analysis, the environmental piece, the document itself. There was a lot to read. The development agreement from Subdistrict 1 is available if anybody wants to. Karen can download it. I've got it if you want to read it to be able to do a comparison of the two. I think they pretty much took the language from from that for this, but there's some things in it that I think were part of Development 1 specific to Cimarron Drive that are done and over with, so would not be an impact part of this particular project. All right, so with that, I think there was a potential motion to adjourn.
Yes, there was, Madam
As I
Chair.
said, it's moved and seconded. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, so we will keep this in committee. We will work with the committee members and all of you to see when it will work for you to come back again. December 8th is the public hearing on the moratorium. We will know more so that night, the sense of the committee. If the moratorium is voted on as submitted and advertised, you know you can't submit housing before the 31st. If we can tweak it or not approve it, you know where you stand. So,
Well, we on behalf of the team, we appreciate all of the comments from the committee and from the councilors that are here.
thank you.
Thank you.